Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to be looking at the game of Blackout, and more importantly, how do we set up our tables and how do we have the terrain we need to play a game of Blackout the way it's meant to be played. Now, for a lot of war games, especially your more popular war games, the bigger, more core games, I guess, that everybody, casual players and war gamers and people maybe that don't even war game would know, normally don't require a lot of terrain. Things can be spaced out. You're not looking for a bunch of cover. You want space on the table to be able to maneuver. Now, there's a couple of reasons for that. Some of these are because they are rank and flank games, like the old world, Ninth Age, back in the day. The game I cut my teeth on was Warhammer Fantasy, and you might only have 5 or 6 pieces of terrain on the entire board, and that was completely playable. But even games that are still skirmish games that are kind of popular out there, things like a Star Wars Legion, don't require a bunch of terrain. And you certainly don't want a densely packed board, or there's not really going to be much action. Now, there's a couple of reasons for this. Number one is because a lot of these games want a bunch of maneuverability for large units, and you need a lot of open space in order to create that. Reason number two is they want long firing lines so that you can get into the action really quickly. Now, one thing to note about most of these games is the board sizes they're operating on are significantly larger. If you're going on a 6-foot by 4-foot board, then yes, that's a lot of space. And if it's so packed with terrain that people have to get in close, it's going to take forever. Here's the difference with a game of Blackout. It's played on a much smaller board. 3x3 is the largest board you're going to be playing on. You can go 4x4, I guess, but that isn't really standard play. 3x3 is pretty standard, and you can even go down to 2x2 for your smaller games, which can actually be a lot of fun, in my opinion, to play that way. But with that small of a board, if you leave it wide open for most games, they're going to be over instantaneously. And so a lot of terrain is important. But also understand that the way that the game of Blackout is built to be played is really as an old school skirmish game. Think kind of like a Mordheim, where you want a table that is densely packed with terrain, okay? And so in this video, we're really gonna talk about some of the rules I have when I'm creating a table to play a game of Blackout. So I have a couple of rules that these are absolute musts that I follow, that as I'm building the table and looking at it, I go, have I checked the box on these rules? And then we're gonna look at a couple of don'ts and things that I've gotta make sure that I don't fall into the trap of allowing to happen. So rule number one is there a lot of scatter terrain? There needs to be fences, barriers, boxes, anything that can kind of get in the way and won't completely obscure models, but provides them a little bit of cover. There needs to be dozens of these objects around your board. The game of Blackout is super lethal, and if you want your games to be interesting and fun and strategic, you need to have your guys able to move from cover to cover, they're really going to get punished if they're out in the open, and so we need that scatter terrain there so that you can play with it and you can use maneuverability without guys getting caught in the open every time they peek their head and try to move anywhere. So dozens and dozens of scatter terrain throughout your entire board. This can be a lot of different things. It can be everything from a crate or a box all the way up to a car that maybe part of it will hide the whole model and maybe the front hood won't hide the whole model. But you need to look around and make sure that your board is stacked all over the place with scatter terrain. Rule number two for me as I look at my board is multi-height pieces of terrain. The game of Blackout is so 3D in nature. It's not like some other games where you're really playing on a 2D board. It's very flat. It's height is extremely important, and it adds an interesting element to the game when you can gain levels, and it gives you an advantage in line of sight. It gives you an advantage in being able to look over other terrain in order to get the shots you need, things like that. But it also adds a different layer if you can go from one side of the board to the other using multi-height terrain in order to get there. Now, I understand that's a little bit different from a lot of gamers coming from different things, where multi-height could be fun, but it's not really necessary. In the game of Blackout, your games are going to be way more fun and play the way they're supposed to play when you are adding in lots of multi-height buildings. Now, I've made that mistake. If you go and you watch my very first Blackout battle report, this is not a plug for you to go watch it, but maybe go look at it really quick and look at the board layout. It's not done well for Blackout. You notice that there's very little multi-height. It's set out on the edges. There's not a whole lot of scattered terrain. I had set it up not fully understanding the game of Blackout yet and how it was meant to be played. And I think it really shows in that video, in the fact that Harlow struggles because they get caught out in the open a lot. Rule number 3 for me when setting up my board is no full table line of sights. Whenever I'm setting up a board, I want to make sure that you cannot gain line of sight from one point of the board all the way to the other side. And so I go and I look at my board from every angle. I walk around the table and make sure that a model set up cannot gain line of sight from one part of the board to the other. Now, the exception to this is if they're getting on a multi-leveled terrain, something like that, that gives them the advantage of sight. That's fine. But if they're on ground level, they shouldn't be able to see from one side to the other. That really makes it an advantage for long range weapons, but also it just takes away from the fun of the game. It's not the way the game is meant to be played. So make sure that you don't have these really long lines of sight. You do want to make sure that you have corridors. You have maybe an 18-inch alley here where they can gain line of sight. Personally, I prefer those. I've done boards, I've played boards where there's none of that, where it's so densely packed, you have no line of sight. My only issue with that is it really makes it difficult for teams that are built to play longer range. They really are automatically at a disadvantage for no other reason than the board setup, and I don't like doing that. I want to make it fair that whatever teams choose to play, whatever forces we're deploying, that they have a fair chance at it. So there's some longer range sights, but none of them are equal to the entire length of the board. Nothing's running the whole length of the board. Now, even though those are my 3 rules, I tend to go towards a couple of other ideas or layouts, if you will, for how I want to set up my board. Number 1 is I might do a key feature. I might have a feature in the middle of the board, and that way it's fair for both teams. It's in the middle of the board, and then what I'll do is I'll decide, okay, do I want an open space around that key feature? I've played games where that key feature becomes the objective point, and if that's what's going on, if it's the objective point is the middle feature, then I want a little bit of a courtyard around it that's open. That adds to the suspense. It adds to the danger of getting to that feature, being able to capture it, being able to hold it, is because there's some open space that you've got to figure out how to maneuver. Now, maybe it's not the objective and it's a height 3 building, something like that, and by height 3, I just mean it goes beyond everything else. It's the biggest thing on the board. One of the things that helps with is sight line. That if the middle object on your board is obscuring sight lines, then you know you're not going to have easy access to long sight lines all across the board because it's going to be blocked in the middle. Sometimes I'll densely pack the terrain in the middle on purpose and leave like an alleyway around the outside of the board. And what this does is it allows shorter range teams to really use the board, the middle of it, as a warren to move in, and it allows faster teams like maybe a Harlow to get on the outside and just sprint around the board and try to do flanking maneuvers And it provides tactical advantages to different types of teams and how you want to set up. So a big thing is, do I want the outside of the board a little bit more open, or do I want the inside of the board a little bit more open? Not really open, but just a little bit more. Another thing that I do is I try to make sure that my boards are as symmetrical as possible. That way both sides are really getting a fair shake. We're not putting it where there's a lot of height on one side and not a lot on the other. The buildings don't have to be identical, but they've got to be similar in nature so that no one is having a huge advantage over the other one just based off of the side of the board that they're on. Another thing that I look for regularly, as after I set up my tables and I've checked my 3 rules, I've made sure that it falls in line with that, is I then go and I make some adjustments to create some firing lanes. Again, I make these equal so that both sides are going to have firing lanes. They won't be in the same place. They won't be the same distance. Maybe, you know, I'm not being that particular, but making sure that there's places where teams can lay down gunmen and use those as good cordons of fire to basically try to funnel the enemy into, or to cut off a part of the board by using that section of the board, putting down an LMG or something like that can sit there and kind of guard it. So it makes the game more tactical, makes the game more interesting, makes it play a little bit more like real life. And then, of course, like I said before, in keeping it symmetrical, make sure you keep it even. Don't give one team an advantage over another team inherently based on how the board is set up. As far as don'ts go, first of all, make sure that there is so much open space that your guys can't move between. And so really check the distances. If you're going, I don't have that much terrain, I totally understand. I come from a Warhammer fantasy background, so terrain was never the thing that I really collected and have a bunch of. I'm slowly getting more, but terrain is my weak spot. I really need to get more, especially as we make battle reports and things like that on the channel. We're not reusing the same things. You'll notice with my terrain I use a lot that I don't have a ton of multi-height terrain. That's something that I've got to get more of to make Blackout games more interesting on the channel and things like that. But if you don't have a bunch of terrain, just kind of move it around so that you're not leaving huge open gaps. You make it so that pretty reasonably units can move between terrain. Maybe there's some open spots that they're going to have to get out into. Just make sure that there's not a lot of open places. That would be my first don't. My second don't would be, don't pack one area of the table and then leave everywhere else sparse, unless it's like a unilateral part. If you're gonna make it really packed, pack it right in the center and then leave everything else scattered. And you know, it really encourages, get into the middle of the table, use that cover, play around those angles and those corners and things like that. My don't number 3 is, don't worry too much about your terrain. Go and have fun. The more games you play, the more you're gonna have a feel for it. There's no rule. If you come from competitive gaming, you're gonna be very frustrated because you're gonna want layouts and diagrams and things like that to where do I place my terrain. Figure it out. The plus to games of Blackout is they're so fast to play that taking a little bit of extra time in order to set up your table the way you want so the game feels good is, you have more time to do that. I know when it comes to games of 40K, I'm like, I just want to throw a table out there because the game's going to be so long. I don't want to waste my time on this. With Blackout, it's the opposite. Take time to set up a table that you're going to enjoy playing with, and then just play with it. Don't get so concerned over how it should be set up. The more games you play, the better feel you're going to get for it. Watch other people, look at pictures of other people, and hopefully you've gained some inspiration from all of these amazing pictures I've gotten from other community members of what their tables look like. You see ones that are densely packed. You see ones that just are lifelike. I love the graffiti some of them have added. I love the little touches. Things like that make the game so much more realistic and help you really transport yourself into the world of Blackout as you're playing it. Some of them have done great jobs with multi-level terrain. And then if you want a good idea of what you shouldn't make your boards look like, go and take a quick snapshot of my very first battle report between Harlow and Manticore, and that'll give you a good idea of what a board shouldn't look like. I got a couple of things right there, but I got a lot of things wrong there, and it heavily impacted the game to Harlow's detriment. Hopefully this has been helpful. Let me know your tips for building tables. Let me know what has helped you. Let me know maybe for someone else that they're struggling with table layout, what are some things, some guidelines, some rules, some do's or don'ts that you might have for yourself that could help them in the comments below. Again, thank you so much for watching this video, and until next time, I will catch you guys later.